On your screen, you see various different ways of giving. Please feel free to use any of those ways. Thank you for your generosity. You continue to show to both GNUC and our partner organizations. Our meditation today was written by all of us. I'll read something to you and then we'll end with a time of silent meditation. Please join me in the spirit of meditation. Relax, breathe, and focus on your thoughts. We are not afraid to be alone with our thoughts, so we don't have to try to control them. We are in a place where we are all connected and where there is an abundance of love and compassion. Let the experience of being here flow through you and be the source of joy. I get to introduce someone that I believe that we all know and love very dearly. Jesse Spencer Smith is Dr. Jesse Spencer Smith, who is the chief data scientist for the Data Science Institute at Vanderbilt University. He leads a team of data scientists who collaborate with researchers across the university, medical center, and with industry partners. He also serves as adjunct professor in computer science. Jesse's doctorate is in cognitive psychology and cognitive science from Indiana University, and he holds a Bachelor of Science in computer science from the University of Florida. Jesse has had a long history in teaching consulting on analytics, spending part of his high school years in his own consulting firm, specializing in building software for civil engineering companies. And we have had the pleasure of Jesse and his family in our congregations since 2010. And with that, I invite Jesse in to speak to us.
Thank you so much, Thina. And thank you for having me join and step out from behind the host duties for today. Want to share just a few things about my interests and my interests growing up. It may not surprise you at all that I was at times a little bit of a strange child. I was about 6 years old when I woke up one morning, and I remember it, or believe that I remember it. Woke up one morning around early in the morning before other people were up, and it suddenly struck me that something very strange had just happened. I had woken up. There had been no awareness before. Now I was awake, and now I was aware again, like I remembered being aware the day before. And later on, as a computer scientist, I realized that what I was struggling with was the cold boot problem. How was I able to reboot and then restart my consciousness on the following day? What prompted it? How was it able to get spinning up again? And I became interested from that point forward in how this thing worked, how consciousness worked, how learning worked, how thinking worked. And later, as computers became more and more available, I began to be interested in how you might program computers to do these things. So early on, I spent a lot of time with computers. One of my first things that I wrote was a game that would play Monopoly. But it was very, very difficult. I could have chosen something far easier to start with, but I was enjoying playing Monopoly at the time. And the problem was you had to encode all the rules. There was no way to teach the computer how to play. You had to write down the specific rules for everything in every situation. It couldn't learn by playing, and I found that very, very frustrating. So I became fascinated by the possibilities of what if you were able to teach a computer? What if you were able to teach it in a regular way rather than by having to program everything? I became fascinated by the good and by the horrible possibilities of that. This is exemplified by my submission to a writing contest that was sponsored by the Optimist Club of Jacksonville. So, in addition to being very interested in concepts around thinking and consciousness and computer science, I was also extremely contrary. And so, when I heard that there was a writing contest from the Optimist Club, I, of course, set out to write the absolute darkest story I could conceive of. And in broad strokes, the story went along the lines of there's been an apocalypse. So we're already at the worst point. There's been an apocalypse. There are a few survivors. They are scientists in shelters, and they decide that they are going to build a fantastic computer to guide them and to rebuild. And the computer, which went by the acronym GGODD, see what I did there? I had the computer decide and assess the state of things and realize that the things were terrible. The scientists were not going to be actually likely to lead humanity to a renaissance. And so it decided to blow everything up and start over. And the story ends with GGODD, see, saying, "Let there be light." Now, the funny thing here was the story actually won. So I guess they kind of got the joke. They liked it. So I won the award. And the only reviewer from the judge where it said, how strongly optimistic was the writing? And the judge just wrote, "Ha." In college, I wrote another short story. This one really more struggling with the idea and with the desire of wanting computers to learn. And in it, I had a computer scientist whose job it was every day to get up, choose a children's story, and read it to the AI. And that's how the AI would learn, like a child being read to every day. And I continued my investigations and my interest in these possibilities, and became an academic, had an academic career involved in understanding how machines might learn concepts. And my career kind of looks like a guide to the hopes and failures of artificial intelligence over the years. I began working in an area known as symbolic AI, where you had to build everything, but if you could represent enough things, then it could learn. Terrible failure, very brittle, wouldn't be able to generalize beyond the very specific problems that you designed, so failure. I switched to mathematical in the study of decision-making in dynamical systems, using mathematics to model what was going on. Again, wouldn't call it a failure. It could model certain things, but again, this was not the general learner. You had to write the equations to make the machine do the things that were more human-like. It was never going to evolve on its own. I got into artificial neural networks. This one had more hope. It could learn things based on examples, but there was a limit to how much it could learn. There was only so much, and it was toy cases that it could learn. So I still had the problem. How could it learn on its own? It was only learning exactly what I was labeling and giving to it. So, for example, it could never handle the subtleties of language. It would think that the phrase "cats are animals" meant exactly the same thing that "men are animals" was. They're completely different. One's much darker than the other, and the artificial neural networks thought they were exactly the same. Yeah, they're both true, and Then about 10 years ago, neural networks started to really pick up again. And there started a revolution around artificial neural networks that did really well with images and could do image recognition and image segmentation, things that we never thought were possible before. Previously, when I worked in that area, we spent all of our time trying to have the AI learn how images might be built, building geoms. Okay, here's this shape, here's another shape, put these together, and now you have a triangle. That was about the level that we could get to. But these new types of machines were actually able to learn those lower level representations on their own with a lot of labeled data. And what happened is they developed something that looked not unlike our own V1 visual cortex. Simple things building up to more complex things until finally you have representations of faces and cars and cats. So very interesting that we're starting to get in this place where the neural networks were beginning to look a little bit more brain-like. But still the problem. Everything had to be labeled. These were millions of images that had to be labeled, fed to the computer before it could begin to learn and do those things. But then, about 3 years ago, there was a breakthrough. There was a new type of AI model called a transformer, and a new type of training called self-supervised learning. So neural networks were able to learn concepts and apply them in novel ways. So what kinds of ways? Well, they could write summaries of longer text. They could answer questions, given a chapter, given a couple of paragraphs, answer questions about that. Could translate between different languages and do it really well, which was very challenging for computers before this. They could even generate meaningful sentences. So given a prompt, generate a paragraph, generate a story, given context, given a prompt. So how good is this text generation capability? Well, as a matter of fact, our opening words and our meditation were generated by one of these models. So not bad. Let's go and take a look at some other examples. So here's a more traditional kind of task here. So we're given a very complex, technical kind of writing here. I'll give you a moment to read and memorize it. This will be on the test. All right, let's see if anybody's really fast. How many square kilometers of rainforest is covered in the basin? Anybody? Bueller? So we have, okay, Scott says
0.7 million.
See now, Thina, you may not know this, but has a strong background as a technical writer. This is her jam. So what was your answer, Thina?
2.7 million square miles.
Okay, 2.7 million square miles. All right, okay, great. Let's give this to the AI and let's see what the AI says. So we actually give it to the AI here. Here's a contest, ask the question. Oh, 5.5 million. Ah, okay.
Oh, wait. Oh, I see it. That's
Basin
kilometers, though, right?
encompasses 7 million, but this rainforest covers 5.5. So think about that.
Is that miles or kilometers?
Yeah, it's kilometers. Yeah, it's kilometers. It didn't say miles. See, I got it wrong. So here's an AI which understands enough of English to pull out the intricacies and be able to answer the question, how many square kilometers of rainforest is covered in the basin? This was simply unthinkable 3.5 years ago. 3 years ago, it became thinkable. Let's go and take a look at another example. So this is very technical. Let's do a different one. Let's do some summaries. Okay, so here's our first principle. First principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And then here's a reflection on the first principle. Again, I'll give you a moment to sort of read through this, think through this. And what I'd like for you to do is to come up with a summary, like a sentence summary or even shorter. What's the shortest summary you could come up with that's sort of understandable, that gets to this idea? What are your ideas? And there are no wrong answers. What are your ideas? Larry.
There's good in everyone.
There's good in every. I like that. Someone else.
Empathy.
Empathy. Excellent. Let's see what the AI picked out as sort of the core theme here. Resonate a bit? The inherent worth and dignity of every person. You don't have to be anything in particular, just being is a blessing. Now, it pulls that actually from the text, but it considers that to be the most central concept. So it can work not just with technical scientific concepts, but with concepts in general. Let's take a look at another example. So here was one of my attempts to get this to generate a meditation. And the way that I did this was I gave it some context. I said, as Unitarian Universalists, so I had to let it know we're Unitarian Universalists, so generate something which is along the lines that would be that a Unitarian Universalist might think of. And we're talking about meditation, so join me in the spirit of meditation. Then I wanted to give it sort of a direction, because there are lots of different kinds of meditation. So I gave it, let us clear our minds, relax, and consider. And then I let it generate. Anybody have an idea of what you might say, or what might you say next here? It's difficult, so many different directions to go. Here's what the AI came up with was, let us come to realize the power of the mind and the will of the heart. We can also find ourselves within our own voice. Fairly you. It captures the context of being a you, this being a meditation. So again, this AI has been able to sort of, in a very flexible way, it's never seen this prompt before in all likelihood. So it was able to come up with something. I searched the internet, by the way, just to make sure it wasn't cheating, that somebody else had written something and it wasn't just looking up. It didn't. So this was novel. This was something that was created based on the context of that I had given it. Let's take a look at another. Let's talk a little bit about how this is possible. So in general, I wasn't wrong in one of my approaches before. Now, I'd like to say that I had a really good idea in my research that if I'd only considered and taken a little bit further would have led to this development. But no, actually, it's that short story that I wrote when I was in college about the professor reading the story to the AI. It turns out that that was the key to self-supervision. And the trick is this: guess the next word. The task is, given some text, guess the next word. Let's do that as a matter of fact. So here is the very first sentence from Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. And the very first sentence is, ships at a distance have every man's wish on. What do you think the next word is? Someone give me a guess.
Board.
On board. And Susan, I think you said desk. So who said board?
Land.
Nancy.
Nancy, you said board. And Susan, what did you say?
Land.
On land, okay. I think somebody else said deck. Anything else?
A star.
On a star, okay, absolutely. Other guesses?
Travel.
Travel, all right.
Adventure.
Adventure.
The horizon.
On horizon, okay. So I can't help but noticing that all of these things that you mention are nouns, and they fit in there. And this is almost like a very highbrow version of Mad Libs, right? So you're doing nouns. How did you all know to do that?
Because on is a preposition, usually followed by a noun.
You knew the rules. You'd learned the rules somehow. So in order to guess something that's even in the ballpark, you have to learn the language model. So you have learned the language model, either being taught it or being exposed to it. There's a lot of debate about how it gets learned. But you learned it because you all hit it. You all had nouns. Okay? But we have a couple of things that are a little bit different. Let's see if we can sort of think through why one might be more desirable than another. So have ships at a distance have every man's wish on the horizon, versus ships at a distance have every man's wish on deck. Which one? Well, and let me give you a really bad one, because nobody said one that was really, really bad. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on the cat. It's a noun, but it doesn't fit because, why doesn't it fit? A couple of reasons here, really, but what's one reason why it's not a good fit?
It makes
There's
zero
no-
logical sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, Scott?
Yeah, there's no connection between ships and cat.
Cats, right? You might have a ship's cat, but you shouldn't be standing on it. That's right. So it doesn't quite fit. So between those two, on the horizon might fit better. It's in the context of sort of a ship at a distance. You'd think of horizon. But which do you like better? Do you like ships on the horizon or on the deck? Which one? Between those two, which one do you like better? Raise your hand if you like horizon. Okay. Raise your hand if you like on deck. So a few more on deck. Okay. Now, similar to on deck is on board. So between every man's wish, ships at a distance have every man's wish on the deck versus ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. Which do you like better? Raise your hand if you like deck. Raise your hand if you like on board. Yeah, I do too. Why? Why do you like on board better? What about it appeals to you?
For me, it's because of the distance piece of it. I don't think I'd be able to see the deck, what's actually on the deck. So it makes sense to me that it's more generically on board.
On board, okay. Other reasons why you might like on board.
On board implies cargo, and the wish is the cargo on the ship.
Love it. Absolutely. So it's poetic, right? And it's sort of drawing you in. So in order to guess what the actual word was, Zora Neale Hurston, hell of a writer, she's going to go with the thing that is most poetic. She chose on board. In order to do that, you would have to have all of these concepts. The concept of what goes with a ship at a distance, and to differentiate between on the deck and on board, you'd have to get into the concept of poetry and what has more value and what is more metaphorical. You'd have to cover all those bases before you could learn that on board was probably what she was going after. So what happens with these models? It turns out that these models are huge. They're the largest computational models that humans have ever produced. To simply power these computers to do the training to train up what are called large language models requires the amount of electricity to run a small city for a month. Hundreds of computers And they're all learning on a single algorithm. And the whole idea and the whole game is guess the next word. So what do they do first? They learn the language model. You show them English text, they learn English. You show them French, they learn French. They learn the language first. Then they learn the lower level concepts having to do with ships. So whenever you have ship, often the words that follow are oars, hull, sail, deck, board, on board. So those are the concepts. Then it has to learn the higher level concepts of styles of writing, metaphor, poetic writing, particular writers. So all of those things are learned and encoded in the model. And thereby, it's capable of these different activities. So what exactly does it learn? And is it useful kind of information? Well, the folks who did the training of the very first large model, one of the very early models, decided to see how well it could do on a science test. It had never been trained on science texts. Instead, it was trained on the millions of documents that you have available on the internet. So those would be books, those would be comments. And yes, these do cause problems because think about what you read on the internet. But this is what it's trained on. So everything you can find on the internet was fair game for this thing to learn on. So how much actually kind of useful knowledge did it learn, though? So they had the idea of giving GPT-2, that's the name of this model, the New York State Regents 8th grade science exam, which consists of complete the sentence, fill in the blank, choose the best match, those types of tasks, all are which tasks which this model can do. It passed. So simply by being read to, simply by being asked to find the next word in the sequence, it had to learn the concepts of water being liquid below a certain temperature, water being ice above another temperature, water being gas being ice below a certain temperature, water being vapor and gas and steam at a higher temperature. And these are all things that it squirreled away, that it encoded in its own way, in its own weights, in its own computational brain, this model, and passed the exam. So never trained to pass the exam, but actually passed the exam all by itself. So that's what it is. What is it not? It is not conscious. This is something I did not think possible up until I actually read this paper and saw this and then saw it work on my own. I did not think it would be possible to have a general purpose learner that could operate without consciousness. So this is a crystalline representation of knowledge gleaned from millions of documents, but without consciousness or understanding. It is pure representation. And it learns by brute force. Timnit Gebru, a leading researcher in artificial intelligence, and in particular these large language models, calls these models the stochastic parrot. So it's a parrot that repeats back to you at a very high level, not just the words, not just the sounds, but the concepts, once it's given enough context, will repeat back to you what it sees. It serves as a mirror to us. It serves as a mirror to what we think and what we represent. So let's go ahead and play a little bit with one of these models. So we actually can interact with these models and see what the models can generate for us. Give me one quick moment. And I'm going to ask you to come up with some questions to ask our AIs. All right, here's one example. This is where we got our first opening words from. Relax, breathe, and on our meditation. We're not afraid to be alone with our thoughts. So this was generated for us. Let's see if we can continue this. I gave it as Unitarian Universalists. Join me in the spirit of meditation. It generated these. Let's go and generate the next phrase here. We dawn. We don't have to. Agree with everything. So what's happening here, it's guessing what the next words might be. Let's take a look at our gathering words. Let's give it a different context. Let's give it the context of our principles. So if we start with our principles and set the context for our principles, especially the principles written for a child, and if you don't know these, in the child's language, our first principle is we believe that each and every person is important. The second principle is we believe that all people should be treated fairly and kindly. So these are the children's versions. So if we then say, how can we be better to one another? Then what it generates is one way is to treat everybody the same. So I invite you, what question do you have for the AI now that the context has been set that we want it to respond in a way that's consistent with our principles, especially principles as we state for our children? What question do you have?
How does critical race theory apply to this?
Oh, it's hedging its bets. It's not too sure which way to go. So it's well, it already picked up inherent rights. It picked up human slavery. So it's picking up on what the concepts are there. So what's happening is it's choosing what concepts are closest that continue the ideas that were presented previously. So this is how it generates responses. Let's go and ask another question. What other questions do you have?
How about, will mankind survive global climate change?
And we might change this in a moment. Oh, lovely. So one of the answers is no, just no. The other is looking like it's coming after. And what's interesting is what came to my mind was what changes would we need to make? So it's going in that, I believe it may be going in that direction. What changes in global, okay, or I'm going to say, would we cause So it's not answering, but it's continuing the question. So what's happening here is that we're holding up a mirror to ourselves. So given some context about who we are, about what we believe, so some context about who we are, and some context about what we believe, we're asking questions, and it's continuing in the way that's most meaningful. Yes, and continuing the question is very, very you. I was struck by that with the others that we generated as well. Let's go ahead and do just a few more here. Let's go ahead and take the principles as written for adults. These are a little bit more difficult because they're like sentence fragments. You ever notice that before? It's like one long complex sentence. So the one thing that I love about the children's version is that it's much more meaningful. This one actually the AI has some trouble with too. Who has another question that we'd like to generate either an answer to or just see what else we can get out?
What is the right of the conscience?
And Karen, which one do you want me to go with?
The top one,
Okay.
always. Is there a ranking?
No, these are all roughly the same. So I actually have the temperature turned up high, which means search broadly. There are certain rules of conduct for any individual. And you'll notice that the wording here is no longer at a child's level. Now we're at a higher level. So we're saying there exist certain rules of conduct for individual or collective body, such as. So it's writing for adults because we gave it information that was written for adults. It picked up on how it was written before and is responding in kind. Such as moral norms for. So again, this is not thought, but this is that mirror being held up to ourselves. So who are we? And it's reflecting back to us who we are and writing back to us in the same voice, using all the knowledge that it has gained from reading all about us on the internet. It doesn't necessarily come to an easy end of closing or anything along those lines, but it will continue to write. Ask, what is the nature of God? All right, let's go right there. So even though we've said, oh, I did not say up here Unitarian Universalist, that might help a little bit, but once you start talking about God, then the most of the writings about God have been done in the English language in the Christian context. So it's answering us from the Christian perspective. So it went straight to the Christian story. All right.
Is the machine doing that, or are you doing that,
The
Jesse?
machine is doing that. Everything which is in gray is the machine. So everything which is in gray is being generated by the machine.
Several questions in chat.
All right. Is it moral to eat animals? Let's go back to the children's version. Okay, I type that part, and then the computer answers. It's hedging its bet. What? Ooh, constitutes. Oh. It's playing with the words. Not unlike, well, so again, very UU, where it responds to your question with another question.
No. See.
All right, let's go and ask another question here. Let's see, we have, does the predictive text on iPhones use this? Actually, it is predicting the next words, but it's using just a much, much simpler model. So here on iPhone prediction, it would not actually be predicting based on the style or the content. It's just a statistical match on the words. Let's try one more question here. At what point does the common good outweigh the rights of the individual? We might go with, that's written for an adult. We might go to the adult version here. And then I'm going to go ahead and put I'm going to go and put Unitarian Universalists as Unitarian, just to give a little bit more context, as Unitarian Universalists. We affirm, I'll give that. Okay, and then the question was, at what point does a common good outweigh the rights of the individual? Where we will reach a balance whether the benefits of society to society are sufficient to outweigh the possible harm. It's doing some moral calculus here. It's in our context, we don't have a single straightforward answer. We say, well, where will we reach the balance? Where are the harms? So we don't have the mirror says that we want to think about balancing. This is what we are known as. Given this context, this is what it generates given no other context. So, we're now at the point where I certainly never thought that we would ever get of being able to hold up a mirror to ourselves and ask deep questions that I never thought we'd be able to answer, to ask of a model in my lifetime. So this generation of AI holds up a mirror, and it allows us to ask the questions of where do we come from, what are we now, and it challenges us to ask the most pressing and consequential question, which is where we're going and what will we become. Words matter, principles matter, and we shape the future not just by our actions, but also by our thoughts. And those are my final words. The AI's final words, when I fed them in the preamble, the AI chose as its final words, the answers that AI brings will be transformative. So that's what it thinks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse. I found that absolutely fascinating. I do have one question for you, though. Well, actually, two. Are you a Marvel Universe fan?
I'm a Marvel Universe fan, yes.
Okay. So, when do we get to the Age of Ultron with this?
Well, here you can think of all of this as being just that memory and that data store. Again, no action, no consciousness, just the mirror being held up to us right now.
Okay. All right.
At
Just
some
making
point.
sure, because that was a scary movie.
Yes.
I had some thoughts about well, way back when, I don't know how young I was in high school. I read
Oh, and Larry, if we
Yeah.
could,
Yeah, I
think
read
what we'll do is we will have a time to chat right after.
Oh.
If that sounds all right. And I
Okay.
will absolutely be around, and we'll have a breakout room where we can, because I'm really interested in hearing what everyone thinks.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. So let's sit back and enjoy a song from This Is Leah called Keep Coming.
Who I am today will not be who I am tomorrow, and who I am tomorrow will keep changing every day. And all the things I learned might fill my heart with joy or sorrow, and everything I learned might make me want to change my ways. Oh, there is nothing, no thing that ever stays the same. That is the one thing that life does guarantee. There is no one on earth, no one who knows what path their life will take, and no one knows what I will see as I keep becoming me. The family you were raised in does not dictate who you marry, and the country you were born in won't decide where you are buried, and all you once believed might leave you stranded on an island where the only way back home is to abandon it as lies. And there is nothing, no thing that ever stays the same. That is the one thing, that life does guarantee. There is no one on earth, no one who knows where their lives will lead, what path their life will take, and no one knows what I will see as I keep becoming me, becoming me. I must stay open to the change, curious and free, and always ready to be rearranged. There is nothing that ever stays the same. That is the one thing that life does guarantee. There is no one on earth, no one who knows what course their life will take, and no one knows who I will be as I keep becoming me, as I keep becoming me, as I keep becoming me, as I keep becoming.
I just love all the songs that she's offered up for all of us to use in our services on Sundays. I'm so, so grateful for Leah. We've come to the time of our service when we do our joys and concerns. I want to thank you, all of you who are on our YouTube channel, and hopefully we'll be